So we now come on to my talk, which is, as you see from the title, 9/11, Sequestered Technologies and the Control of Information. And we will try and have time for questions at the end of the day. So in this presentation we will attempt to look at what some people have said about free energy devices, because it's all about energy. This, for people that saw the programs that I did with Richard last week and the week before, this kind of fleshes out some of that story, and I think Richard did a brilliant job, as he always does on these programs. And again, I'd like to thank him at this point for all that he's done and the support that he's given to the research of Dr. Judy Wood, because without that, I don't think there were probably quite a few people in this room would never have heard of it, because they've tried to cover it up. But I think slowly we're starting to win the battle now, but I'll come to that later. We're going to have a brief mention of several inventors and inventions in relation to free energy, that is. Some of the sequestered free energy technologies as well, of course. We're going to look at one of the reproduction of Tesla's experiments by somebody called Paulsness, who had a YouTube channel. And then one of the central things I want to cover is the cold fusion story, which involves Dr. Eugene Malov and Stephen E. Jones. And we're also going to talk about John Hutchison as well, who's a very key figure in this story. We'll look a bit about water-powered vehicles, which Richard covered in his programme a little bit on Bedini motors, Bruce De Palma and the End Machine, which is a very important part of the story as well. We're going to look at the death of some of these inventors. A few of these people, as covered in Richard's programme, turn up dead. We're going to try and mention Dr. Stephen Greer and his energy-related projects, which I think also form an important part of this story. And we're going to then look at why we haven't got widespread use of free energy, why we're still stuck in the fossil fuel paradigm completely. And then we're going to look at the main reason for that people don't talk about is this free energy technology is already known about. It's not a theory. It's not that, we think we might be able to do it. Somebody is able to do it because it's already been turned into a weapon, and that weapon was used to destroy the World Trade Center, which is one of the key things in all of this that very few people will talk about. It's heavily censored on the internet, which I'll come to. Common statements: there's no such thing as free energy, right? No such thing as free energy. And there's no such thing as a free lunch. You've all heard these sorts of expressions. Free energy is impossible. It breaks the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, heat and mechanical work being mutually convertible. You can't get energy from nowhere, so there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. If someone had created a free energy device, they'd be a billionaire. That's another common statement that you hear people say. Why haven't we all got such a thing? It would be of such huge benefit. No one could or would want to suppress it. That'd be ridiculous. Yeah? If you can produce this, battery that lasts forever, you'll be a millionaire overnight. Of course you would. Of course you would. Well, I used to think that, but the truth is, no, you wouldn't. In fact, you're more likely to end up dead. Perpetual motion is impossible. Physicists will tell you that. No one has demonstrated a device which produces more energy than is fed into it in some form. I disagree with that statement. Now, over unity and perpetual motion. Over unity, you hear this expression in relation to free energy devices. That means you get out more energy than you put in. Okay? And it comes when you divide the amount of energy output by the amount of energy input, and you end up with a figure of greater than 1. You put 100 watts in, you get 200 watts out. Said to be impossible. It is often confused in physics as well. It's also called unity because a unity is another name for 1. That's where this unity, word comes from. It is often confused with perpetual motion because the idea is then that you could connect the output of a free energy device into its input and it would run forever, in theory. And I've got one example. I'm going to have to probably skip over some of this because we won't have time to cover all of it, but I'll try and cover as much as I can. We're going to briefly look at Michael Faraday and Nikola Tesla now. And what we find is that if you look way back in history, Michael Faraday, he invented something called a homopolar generator. And this is like, as you see, Faraday died in 1867, so we're going back, almost 150 years. And he was an English chemist and physicist who studied the magnetic field around a conductor carrying a DC electric current. Okay? And he established the basis for the magnetic field concept in physics. It was him that actually came up with this. He discovered electromagnetic induction, diamagnetism, and the laws of electrolysis. Okay? Michael Faraday did an experiment on December 26, 1831, in which he co-rotated, that means rotated at the same time, a magnet with a copper disc and measured a current output. Even though he had done that experiment, his own law of induction tended to ignore that he'd done this. In other words, it produced an anomalous result according to his law. Known for over 150 years, the current generated during the operation of the Faraday homoponal generator could not be properly explained. So it's one of these things that's left buried in the textbooks as a real effect, but nobody could explain it. The world later embraced Faraday's two-piece induction generator, whose drawbacks include mechanical friction and electrical losses. And the rest is history. Tesla looked at free energy. He knew that we could get energy. He discovered it. He was able to tap into it to some extent. One day, man will connect his apparatus to the very wheelwork of the universe, and the very forces that motivate the planets in their orbits and cause them to rotate will rotate his own machinery. And that's essentially what he was trying to do, and I think he was successful in doing that, at least to some extent. Tesla's experiments showed that there was a radiant energy field, that's what he called it, present everywhere. It just needed the right equipment to extract this energy. And sometimes you needed to put energy into a system to make the radiant energy visible. Niagara Falls famously used generators which were originally designed by Tesla, and there's this story that when they first set these things going and they switched them on, they got such a sort of kick. When they shut them down, they got this huge sort of back EMF, and it blew out certain circuitry because they weren't expecting it. So it was as if this radiant energy, was coming from nowhere, and they didn't really expect it to be there. And ever since then, circuits have been designed to kind of try and get around that. Okay. Now, again, you can go on and look at the history of many free energy devices. I mean, there's lots of places on the internet you can find them. There's some that have actually been covered in TV documentaries. I've got another DVD with three TV documentaries on it where some of these are covered. And one of them is the hydrosonic pump, which was designed by James Griggs in the 1980s. And that was simply like a motor you put, it had a hollow spindle and a flywheel with holes in it. And you fed water through the middle of the spindle, and then the motor accelerated the water to come out through the fly holes in the flywheel, the wheels in the flywheel, and it would create an excess amount of energy. You would get more energy, it was about 125% efficient, according to the measurements that were made on this. Wilbert Smith designed a magnetic sink circuit in the 1950s to extract a small amount of energy from the Earth's magnetic field. And then you can also do some research, if you wish, into Schauberger's repulsine experiments in the 1930s and 40s, which some have claimed would be used for the basis of some of the alleged Nazi source of technology, because this repulsine thing is supposed to have taken off. There's all kinds of stories about that. But I'm not going to go much into the Schauberger material here, so we don't have the time. Now, there's been a number of reproductions of some of Nikola Tesla's experiments, and a number of interesting videos you can find on YouTube that have been posted. They've reproduced the wireless transmission of power. This is a very key thing that Tesla developed, and there's this famous Wardenclyffe Tower that he built, which was funded initially by J.P. Morgan, and then he had his funding taken away. But what we're going to see here, I'm going to play this video from Paulsness, and you'll see that what's shown here is not ordinary electric current.
Good afternoon. I'm going to show you a few things that Tesla has sent to us many years ago. Out of his lectures, books, on page 134, figure 19, you'll see the circuit right here. And also the same circuit can be found in his book, The Innovations, Research and Writings of Nikola Tesla. In this book here, it's found in several places. The one we're going to be demonstrating today will be on figure 183. Also, I've gained some of this information from Jerry Vassalato's book, Lost Science, and his other book, Secrets of Cold War Technology. Both are invaluable. Here you'll see my setup. It's two copper rods connected across the top with another copper rod that is on a slidable scale. I can slide it up and down. I have lowered it from the higher position today just so you can see it on the film. My camera is not quite tall enough to catch the whole thing, but it slides up and down. It's just two parallel bars of copper. At the bottom of there is capacitors, just like he says in his book, and the spark gap in the front here, powered by a 10,000 volt transformer at the back. And I'll be connecting light bulbs across the bars on these two slidable points, both of which are independently slidable. All light bulbs are 110 volt bulbs. The only little bulb will be this bulb right here, which is a 12 volt light bulb. That's for out of an automobile type bulb. And this fluorescent tube here, I don't think it has a voltage rating on it. And we also have this big fluorescent tube over here. So I'll turn the machine on now. Arc is quite loud, so I won't be talking during this part of the demonstration.
So that proves that that is not normal electricity, but he makes it clear in the video you shouldn't mess around unless you know what you're doing. Tesla was messing around with that stuff, let's see, 100 years ago? And that's just, one example. But that, I mean, when I saw that, that was amazing. And there's other people that have done it as well. I'll just mention this fellow again, I'd like to almost do a whole presentation on this guy, Wilhelm Reich. He doesn't get talked about a lot. In fact, it surprises me because a lot of people are talking about chemtrails, weather modification. This guy's name hardly ever gets mentioned in that story. Okay, it gets mentioned in relation to orgone energy, which was this form of like life energy or ether energy that he discovered. Sometimes called perhaps etheric energy, zero-point energy or vacuum energy that Reich discovered. And he was actually studying this form of energy in relation to human sexuality, believe it or not. And he was actually, he worked as an assistant to Sigmund Freud. And he found that there was some type of energy, life energy, which was within people, which he then became very interested in. And he ended up constructing what are called orgone accumulators, and you can go and read about those. And Dr. Eugene Malov, who I'm going to talk about later, he became interested in rights research in the 80s and 90s, in the 90s probably. And other people have reproduced rights experiments in Russia and so on. And so some of the things you can get out of orgone accumulators are also very anomalous. They don't appear to make sense in the standard form of physics. So he's somebody you can look into as well. Now, this is something that Richard and I discussed in the programme. Low energy nuclear reactions. Is this pathological science? That's what it was labelled as. I think it's actually a pathological cover-up. And that's what's happened. Because I contend that when cold fusion came onto the scene in 1989, the academic community realised that this was kind of a hole that they had to plug very quickly. Because if this research got going and got out there, it was going to be lampshade time for the fossil fuel-based companies. Now, Pons and Fleischmann were world-class chemists, and they worked at the University of Utah. And they had worked for 5 years to develop a process which seemed to yield too much energy to be a simple chemical reaction. Again, they were chemists. What do chemists study? Chemical reactions. And they do have to know about what sort of energy it goes into and comes out of certain chemical reactions to be able to develop them into use in industrial processes and so on. So they knew what they were doing. And they discovered that if they mix together deuterated water, lithium hydroxide and a palladium electrode, and you set this up in a particular way, they actually observed neutron emission. Now, a neutron is a particle of no charge according to the standard atomic theory, and you should only see that when you've got a radioactive compound in its vicinity. But they were actually detecting neutron emission. I'll play the clip and you'll see a bit more how this works. I won't describe it here. In 1989, they announced their findings at a press conference, which was very unusual. They wouldn't normally do that. They would normally do it in a scientific journal, and then it would be peer-reviewed. They were criticised for this, as they would normally have announced it in a peer-reviewed journal, as I say. Now, cold fusion should more correctly be called low-energy nuclear reactions, LENR. And this somewhat inaccurate description, cold fusion, appears to have been coined by a certain Stephen E. Thermite Jones, believe it or not. Yeah. It was him that coined that term in around 1989. Isn't that strange?
Wasn't it him that caused Fleischmann and his mate to announce?
Essentially, he was involved in trying to discredit cold fusion. Jones was.
Water itself is quite a mysterious and powerful substance. Given enough time, it can erode steel and rock. It is composed of hydrogen and oxygen, two of the most reactive elements on Earth. Science has also known for over 200 years how to extract hydrogen and oxygen gas from water through the process of electrolysis. It was from this field of electrochemistry and not nuclear physics that there emerged a revolutionary idea of a new kind of fire from water. In the 1980s, Fleischmann and Pons used their own money to conduct experiments for 5 years. They passed a current through an electrochemical cell containing heavy water, or deuterium oxide. One of the electrodes, the negatively charged cathode, was made of the precious metal palladium. The electrical current separated individual deuterium nuclei, or deuterons, from the heavy water and forced them to pack tightly into the palladium cathode. What happened next inside the palladium at the atomic level remains a mystery, and became the subject of intense debate. Whether it was actual nuclear fusion or some other as yet unknown phenomenon, the result produced far more excess heat energy than any known chemical reaction. Why is such a phenomenon so astonishing? Why did it provoke such outrage in the physics community? To most classically trained physicists, the concept of low-level nuclear reactions producing significant heat energy was inconceivable.
it was a very unfortunate time to make such an announcement for various political reasons, really. The situation in the United States, the situation with regard to the program in hot fusion. So that was against it, but also, of course, was the fact that we were not ready to make such an announcement. The criticism of pathological science is one which has quite frequently been leveled at unusual investigations, which admittedly sometimes are at fault. However, there is also the situation that people will criticize a field long after they should really have given up, and that is pathological criticism. They just get trapped in a situation. They have made a criticism. They have to maintain that criticism against all the evidence.
At Texas A&M, a group led by Professor John Bockris, who is widely regarded as one of the world's greatest electrochemists, reported finding the hydrogen isotope tritium, a key signature that some unusual nuclear reaction was going on.
The first thing was this thing called tritium, which was a sub-form of hydrogen which should not exist except in extremely tiny quantities. We found that by working these cells of Fleischmann and Pons containing lithium hydroxide and deuterium oxide, that we could produce this tritium in great abundance, let's say at 10,000 times more than it ought to be there, as it were. And let me stress that we couldn't do it every time, but about one result in 5 or one result in 4, and eventually we worked up to 2 results out of 3. We could produce tritium. That was the first thing, and in a way it was the first clear proof of the phenomenon.
At Texas A&M, Bockris's group found themselves under attack. Science magazine writer Gary Tobbs wrote a stinging article that insinuated that someone in the group had spiked the samples with tritium. Although unfounded and eventually proved untrue, the allegation effectively dampened Bockris's remarkable claims.
Well, I was 69 years old at that time. I took the attitude, suppose they fire me, right? It doesn't really matter. I'd had my career. The worst they could do would be to say, go, your tenure is withdrawn. And therefore I wasn't frightened. And I went on saying the truth and publishing what we'd got. But finally the university revolted against this. And they set up an inquiry, they called it rather sinisterly. The accusation was that I had carried out misconduct of research, you see, that I shouldn't have worked on these things. And they decided that the accusations were totally groundless, and they published all this. But then they started all again about 6 months later, and they had another committee. It was this time, when my lawyers asked the university what the second inquiry was about, they were told, it's an ad hoc committee. What's that? We have nothing further to tell you. And so this went on for 11 months of constant meetings and inquiries and so on. And I'm quite sure that they were trying to find an excuse to end my tenure, you see. Finally they came out okay. I mean, they gave me another letter. I'd had the letter of complete exoneration. This time it said that they had spent this 11 months and had found that I had never done anything, the phrase used were, that contravened the rules of procedure of this university, or something rather formal and stuffy like that. But I think the main part was that I had done work which was against the paradigm, and that was what they were really upset about. You know, people said that they'd been to other universities and people had laughed at it and said, what the heck are you doing, trying to disprove the laws of nuclear physics? And of course that's exactly what we were doing, and succeeding, you see.
Even though positive results were still coming in, the Department of Energy's negative report effectively killed congressional funding in the United States. Fleischmann and Pons later packed their bags and left for France to carry on private research sponsored by the Toyota Corporation.
By 1992, we had video recordings of intense energy release. By the summer of 1994, we had demonstrated sustained energy release. That, of course, if you say you wish to make this into a device, required further research. And we were always working on a time frame of trying to get to that point by about the year 2000. And I think that if the resources had been available, we would have got to that particular point, probably before the year 2000. But this did not happen.
Yet as early as 1992, cold fusion experimenters began reporting unusual appearances of trace amounts of different metals such as copper, silver, chromium, and zinc when examining their spent cells. Rechecking for possible contamination, scientists like Botras and Miley confirmed that indeed new metals and isotopes were being formed, transmuted, during the process which produces excess heat.
Kevin Wolf made many measurements of tritium. Then he got some even more astonishing results as early as '92, which were these transmutational results, the metal forming another metal inside the electrode, you see, which was super anti-paradigm. You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, which we mustn't use, but it was a form of that in a way, that was creating new metals, you see.
In Japan, Tadayoshi Omori and Tadahiko Mizuno at Hokkaido University have produced volumes of data under rigorously designed experiments showing the production of metals ranging from iron to platinum and beyond. The Omori cell using a tungsten cathode has consistently produced excess energy along with measurable amounts of transmuted metals.
So there you go. And that's, cold fusion has resurfaced a little bit in recent months and years because there have been various re-investigations of it, but they're still trying to keep this at a low level. Okay, so, you know, again, I encourage you to do your own research into this and see where it takes you, but it does take you directly into the story of 9/11, which we'll come into. Now, and I'm going to bring this in now, because that film that you just saw a clip from, it's called Fire from Water. It's a 1-hour documentary, and you can it's on YouTube, so you can go and watch it. And it was made by Eugene Malov and Steve Krivet, I think, for their Infinite Energy website. So I recommend you go and watch that. And anyone know who the narrator's voice was?
Beat me up.
It was indeed. It was Jimmy Doohan, James Doohan, who was Scotty from Star Trek. He was the narrator in that documentary. Anyway, if you get Dr. Eugene Malov's book, which is kind of what that video, you know, that video was kind of a video of Malov's book, you will find that on 100 pages of his book, Stephen E. Jones is mentioned. Here's a clip from another documentary which I've got on DVD, about 40 seconds long.
Since Pons and Fleischmann were both well aware of the pitfalls of premature publicity, why would they bypass the accepted conventions of the peer review system and announce their discovery through the media?
I was thinking, these guys are no fools. They know what they're doing. These are good scientists.
Prior to the 1989 announcement, Stephen E. Jones, a physics professor at nearby Brigham Young University, learned of Pons and Fleischmann's work through an informant at the DOE. In a flagrant example of shameless opportunism, Jones insisted on going public quickly with his comparatively much less clear results. Disparaging the excess heat claims of Fleischmann and Pons, Jones' announcement would have effectively prevented the two scientists from patenting their process, a process they had developed on their own over long years of research. On the advice of university attorneys, Pons and Fleischmann, feeling their backs to the wall, reluctantly delivered their work to public scrutiny.
Jones, essentially what he did was, Jones did do research into what has become known as cold fusion before Pons and Fleischmann, but he basically said, oh yeah, I've done research into cold fusion, but all it is just an academic curiosity. You can't get energy from it. And he actually explicitly stated that. We played that clip on Richard Hull's program. Said, no, you're not going to get energy out of this. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. But he essentially shut down this idea that cold fusion could be used to get, usable energy from. He was responsible for helping to shut that idea down.
Is it a shortcut to fusion energy? I don't want to disappoint anyone. I think I'll read my lips answer here, and then I'll carry on. I think that'll become clear why I'm saying that. Can you read my lips on that back in the back? It says no. Energy is a long way off. That's why I say no. This is our result. It's just way off. It's I think a door that's open to us, but really a door on physics more than on energy. Geophysics in particular could be an interesting area.
Now, just a summary of the cold fusion as I've seen it from what I've read and looked at, it seems that the whole affair was managed from start to finish. Sorry, Conrado.
Let me add something.
Conrado is an expert on cold fusion, by the way, so if anybody wants to know about cold fusion, talk to Conrado.
You know, when I mentioned cold fusion was brought to the public on March 23rd, 1989, at the spring equinox. Now, when was the superluminous neutrino thing also that has had a similar light on the media being brought? September 23rd. That's fall equinox. We're talking about management of public's perception of science and what is possible, giving them the hope and then pulling it back.
Right, so what Conrado I think is saying that this idea of management is also indicated by the dates when things happen.
It's a possibility.
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's hinted at. Yeah, well, we'll carry on, Albert. We can talk about that afterwards because I haven't got a lot of time. The goal was to trash and debunk the science, and it seems a whole array of skeptics and debunkers were wheeled out to stomp out the fire. And that's what happened. And you can read about this in Mallo's book in quite some detail. And it was the first time the phrase pathological science was brought into general use. That was coined at that time. People I speak to today say things like, their results have never been reproduced. And this, of course, is wholly untrue. You saw the Japanese research in that video showing you an actual working cell. So people want to lie about this. It's like they don't want free energy. Basically, in many cases, it's difficult to reliably reproduce the conditions under which the cold fusion effects take place. And Bockris said that. He said that they started off maybe 1 in 4, and then they got it to 2 out of 3 results. Different reproductions have different results in terms of seeing excess heat, evidence of a nuclear process, neutrons or tritium, which is an isotope of hydrogen, and transmutation of elements, which also is a very important factor in this. So Bruce De Palma, he was a brother of Brian De Palma, and he was a Hollywood film director. He had to leave the USA due to his research because of what he was doing with this N machine. I've got a booklet about this at the back there. So Bruce De Palma studied electrical engineering at Harvard in 1958, and he taught physics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology for 15 years, working under Harold Eugene Edgerton. So again, he knows what he's doing. He's working in the academic community. He was also employed by Edwin Land of the camera company Polaroid, and he's the brother of the Hollywood film director, as I said. In his study of inertia, he was studying inertia in some of his research, he developed a kind of rotating magnetized gyroscope, which I might call it that. And this was what became known as what he called the M machine. And you can see that in the picture here. These, I'm not sure which part of this rotates, but you've got, coils and magnets in here rotated in a particular way, arranged in a particular configuration.
Right now we have the entrenched energy monopolies and cartels. We have OPEC and we have the 7 sister oil companies that control all the oil and energy. But what people have to understand is that the people who run the energy business in this world, which is the biggest business on the planet, turning over $4 to $5 trillion a year, it's bigger than guns and drugs, it's bigger than defense. They control the newspapers, they control the governments. But these companies are so big that they regulate the government, which regulates them.
In 1977, Bruce De Palma unveiled the first prototype of the N machine, an electrical generator which uses rotating magnets to generate up to 5 times more power than it takes to drive it.
I know about the fact that the Japanese government and the Indian government have ongoing projects to produce N machines for domestic power. My partner is Paramahamsa Tiwari, who is the director of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, which operates all the nuclear plants in India.
In late 70s, I learned from Bruce De Palma that he had carried out certain crucial experiments by rotating electromagnets.
Tewari tested a prototype based on De Palma's N machine under laboratory conditions. The results were deemed too impressive, causing disbelief and suspicion among conservative government officials and the power consortiums that backed the project. Tewari was forced to abandon the project completely.
One of the pivotal people that I encountered early in my career was Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut.
Edgar J. Mitchell, an Apollo mission astronaut, founded the Noetics Institute in Southern California. The Institute's charter was supposedly to develop alternative energy systems by attracting inventors from all over the country. Mitchell became extremely interested in De Palma's N machine. He made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which De Palma naturally refused.
He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off. So I was scared to death. The CIA operates through various very innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than a benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring free energy into the world?
And that situation still exists in the United States today, where a person that really understands what's going on just can't get their idea out because the alternative science and medical fields have been co-opted by the intelligence services.
And he converted this little engine to run on water. This is many, many years ago. And he used it for several years. And somehow the news got out, and one day he got visitors, and he was told to dump the engine or else. 3 weeks later, the man was dead. And the coroner's finding was that he fell off the back of a train. He was drunk. Now, it happened that he didn't drink.
There is no progressive science in a world where every scientific idea is evaluated for its military potential.
Power, or energy, control of energy equals power in the new world order that is emerging. If you control the energy, the way we get around, the way we get electricity, the way we have our TVs and video cameras and stuff, if you do the control of the energy, then you've got control of the people.
That clip pretty much says it all, really, in a few sort of short minutes. De Palma ended up dead under mysterious circumstances. Again, there's quite a lot of information. This was not a surprise considering the condition I had seen Bruce in when I visited him in December 1993. Bruce began each day upon arising some time before noon with fine wine mixed with sparkling water. Years of alcohol and substance abuse finally took its toll. So they accused him of being a druggie and an alcoholic, and then he took his own life. That's the story that you'll read on the internet. The mystique and enigma that encircled the life of Bruce De Palma was due in part to the fact that he was never able to prove his theories with a working over unity device. Oh really? Oh really? Well, I think the demonstrations that you were seeing there part of would probably disagree with that conclusion. And De Palma was also right about these IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. That is one of these front organisations where they attract people towards it and then they can be controlled opposition. And Edgar Mitchell, I think, is part of that. He never walked on the moon. In fact, none of them did. I've got a whole DVD about that. So if you want to go and look at that separately, you can. That's a whole other 2-hour presentation. I used to believe it. I watched Apollo when I was 4 years old. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. That's the effect it had on me. But now I know it's all just a pack of lies. And then we've got another one, another familiar story.
Now to another good idea, and imagine a machine that could power your house for free. Well, that's exactly what 2 Australian inventors claim they've developed. Using magnets and a battery, their new generator has been described as revolutionary, and foreign investors are lining up for a piece of the action. Chris Allen reports.
So, John, this is the machine?
Yes, this is it, Chris.
What's it capable of?
Well, it'll power a house. The machine will provide sufficient electricity to run a house and have power to burn.
It sounds too good to be true, but inventor John Christie is convinced his machine will change the world. So, John, basically you're saying this machine can produce 5 times as much power as it consumes?
Yes, it does. This one, exactly as we see it, it does. And in fact, it can produce more than that.
Once kick-started from a battery, John and his partner Lou Britz say this prototype will run for years without stopping. generating 24 kilowatts of power a day.
You don't get more revolutionary, I think. I mean, we're talking about something that has the capacity to change the way that the world produces its electric power. There's a capacity to change the way that cars are propelled. You can replace the combustion engine, in fact.
John, these are big claims. Are you sure you can live up to them?
We don't really need to live up to them, Chris. The technology speaks for itself.
I mean, a householder could buy one of these machines and install it in his garage and power his house forever without buying another kilowatt from a retailer. I mean, that's how serious it is.
Steve Brassington is an independent electrical engineer. He's seen the machine and backs up everything John says.
It's revolutionary. That's the only way to describe it. I think the technology, it's not bending physics, it's just using principles that I guess are commonly in use in power generation today in a different way. These guys have thought outside of the square.
Basically, it's magnetic attraction and magnetic repulsion that provide the movement or the moment of the motor.
Can you understand why some scientists are sceptical about it?
There is no physicist or engineer who has looked at our motor or has looked at our figures who says it doesn't work.
Lou is an electrician and John a businessman in Cairns in far north Queensland. The two unlikely inventors have been tinkering with their machine for 6 years. They've applied for an international patent and have been swamped by people wanting a piece of the action.
These are the coils. We mentioned the coils don't get hot.
Local businessman Alex Roma is one of the many offering money to help develop the generator.
If it proves up to be what they say it is, it certainly would be something I'd invest in.
John has also spoken to millionaire inventor George Lewin, the man who came up with the Triton workbench and who's now setting up a fund to stop Australian inventions going overseas.
There's an opportunity here, I think, to share an invention with the world that is beyond anything that we've ever contemplated before.
Scientists here at the local university say while they're interested in John's machine, they're also cautious. They say if the machine can generate as much power as John says it can, then they will have to rewrite some of the laws of physics. And they've urged people to be cautious about investing in it until the generator has been independently tested.
Anybody who says it doesn't work hasn't seen it or hasn't looked at our figures. They haven't reviewed it. If they look at it, they'll all agree with us that it does work.
John says the household generator should be available in a year and sell for about $5,000. If he's right, it will make him much more. And how much do you think your technology could be worth to you?
I have absolutely no idea.
We could be talking about millions of dollars here?
Yes, very definitely talking millions of dollars, but I'd hesitate to even take a stab at it.
Good idea.
That bit at the end is just classic, isn't it? Oh yeah, good idea. But that, I forget when that, I don't know if I put, they started this apparently, the first sort of came into public sort of knowledge around 2001. And I think that I forget when that broadcast was made. I should have made a note of it. I believe it was about 2007 when that news report was done. But now if you go onto their website, lutech.com.au, website doesn't exist. It's gone offline. Now what I found tends to happen, I'll probably mention this later, that all you need to do is various ways you can kill these projects. You can kill the inventor, that's pretty extreme. Yeah, or you can sort of basically make them an offer to develop it, and then you can wrap up the whole money thing in some loop, some financial loop. Or you can send in the lawyers and somebody can say, oh, well, that coil that you used in your device, I actually patented that in 1983. So you can't produce it until that's all sorted out. You know, anything. It's easy to stop these things. And that's what I think has happened to this device as well. But then, of course, people then think, once it's been stopped, and the language that's used in the news broadcast, oh, it's revolutionary and blah, blah, blah. People think, oh, well, they must have been mistaken, or they must have been trying to con people out of money. You know, when you don't hear about it again, the assumption then is the people or the technology, either the technology didn't work or the people were being disingenuous. Let's see. Yeah, the John Bedini motor. This is one that also appears to work, and this is something that if anybody has got their own workshop and ability to develop something, this is something you can fairly easily experiment with.
Because as the system operates, it also captures and delivers usable energy.
We had a little trigger signal from this battery over here, and that starts the motor, which we're going to do right now. And if you come around to this side over here, you can see over here, we'll slow it down a little bit. Over here it's magnetically triggered on this side. Come over here. So each time one of these things goes around here, it puts a little trigger signal into these coils. And once we get the trigger signal in there, then what we can do is we can, each time this triggers, turns on and turns off, we can collect the charges that would normally be wasted. And of course they go into these banks over here, these capacitor banks, and then this is a timing mechanism here, which it's timed to be about once every second and a half or so, and makes contact here after we collect the charges. And then these capacitors here are dumped through this electronic switch here, and you can actually see the dump here. You watch it and it'll bounce up when it dumps. So if we slow it down a little bit so you can see it. See, it's bouncing around here. Each time that dumps down, the capacitor bank discharges into this battery. So this battery is going up. As this mechanism triggers here, these are coils. Okay, so the first thing that happens is it wants to repel the magnet like you see it doing here. Okay, it's because it's turning. But these are tri-Fowler wound coils, meaning that they work like a transformer, but it's not exactly a transformer because they're one-to-one. So the only thing that can go through this transformer is the radiant spike. And the radiant spike is collected in these condensers. And if we put the meter on it here, so you can watch it, you can watch how the spike is collected. You see? Goes up and down because it's charging and discharging. Now watch, we'll switch condensers. And this one will charge slower. See, and you won't see much of a discharge. When we move to this one over here, it charges much faster. When you hit that battery with the radiant energy, the battery takes the energy from the vacuum in the chemical process and converts it to something that's usable at a later time. In other words, it's a triggering mechanism. You have to trigger your circuits to produce a radiant spike, and then the radiant spike, when it hits the chemical action, sucks the energy from the vacuum. And that's what's charging the battery, breaks it off. After radiant charger charges batteries, it's a little more difficult to charge with a conventional charger. Takes a longer time after that. So there is an alteration that takes place from using this form of energy that takes place in the chemical composition of the cells. And once it's attuned to this way of charging, the battery accepts the radiant charger much faster each time, higher power density output each time. So a 33 amp hour battery might look like a 65 amp hour battery. The difference is radiant's one form of energy, EM as we use today, electromotive force energy, isn't capable of charging this sulfated battery because it sees nothing. It sees an infinite resistance. Okay? Radiant energy doesn't, being that the energy is like 100 times or 200 times what the sulfation process is. Here, you can look at it again. Now it's brighter. See? And it'll keep doing that. The sulfation will come right off the plates. And the battery will become a pretty good battery again. You can see here that there's 8 magnets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all North Pole. There is no South Pole. This motor does not switch back and forth. It's an attraction motor. It's not a repulsion motor. So every time that it's attracted in, it fires like a magneto. Then the electronic circuitry decides to fire, but see, it's out of range when it fires. It's at like 23 degrees after. So when it fires this field, the field is big and pulls in the next magnet, and it repeats the same process. So we want to do this as quickly as possible. So you see one pole here, one pole here, one pole here, one pole here, one pole down here, one pole down here, and we want them all to fire at the same time. So if you look, all the magnets are lined up to fire at the same time in this direction, and then when the motor moves over here, all of them are lined up to fire in this direction. Once we do that, this is what we can do. Then we got a self-pulsing motor with torque.
Good day to you. I've decided to use the name for this particular experiment as Daft Man, because I must be daft to getting involved with this kind of thing in the first place. But after seeing a few videos on YouTube, I started to get a bit inquisitive and decided to go on, I'll have a go then. Let's see what all this hype is, whether it works or not. So here we go. I've actually got 2 coils. I don't know if you can actually see that. 22 SWG, 26 SWG, and a 28 SWG, 500 turns. That's 500 turns, bipolar. I think that's what you lot refer to it as. On that coil, and the same on that coil. Now, as you can obviously see from what I've said and what I've just said, I've got 3 tapped-in outputs. One is the actual pulse, one would be the trigger circuit, and one is a generation circuit. But obviously the trigger circuit also generates power as well. Same with that coil there, exactly the same as what I've just described. Underneath, I don't really want to tip it up, but underneath, I don't know if you can actually see that, there's some magnets flying around. It's just tripping reed switches. So the only difference with mine is you've probably seen that capacitor at the back and wondering what that's for. Right, well the first motor, which is the drive motor, which is what I refer to it as, just so for clarity, actually drives, the outputs of those go down into the bridge rectifier here, which then goes off and charges that capacitor. I shouldn't put my fingers too close to that, it's quite high voltage at the moment. Which then goes into the second trigger circuit, which is on that board at the back, that triggers that motor. So, the output of the 2 generation sides of that motor go into the rectifier, charge that capacitor, triggers the second circuit, then I tap the output off the second circuit into the next bridge rectifier, which then charges this battery. This battery's just come off charge this morning. It was about, I don't know, I think it was about 9-10 volts, and it's now charging, just to show you, that's the reading from that battery. It's now charging. It's actually, I've got to put some sort of regulator, and it's actually overcharging very slightly. It went to 14 volts a few minutes ago. But you can see 1381 there. The supply battery is 1198 solid, and that's the current it's actually using at the moment. So, for some unknown reason, mine keeps speeding up a little bit and slows down a little bit. I'm assuming it's when the capacitor starts using the current, and it just seems to do this sometimes. I don't know why, but something I've got to look into. Maybe it's just a bearing that's starting to wear or overheat. It has been running for, oh God, it's got to be running for months now, non-stop this has. I have actually got a little electronic circuit that I normally have on this that switches the batteries over. So when this one runs down to about 8 volts, it switches over to the next battery and swaps the charge over at the same time. So it just keeps swapping the battery, flip-flopping if you like, and keeps the whole thing running. The problem is, if you let the batteries run too low, and I've noticed this, if I let this battery here run down to about 2 volts, and then put a new fully charged battery on, which is what I normally use, a pair at the back there, and I let them charge up, I find that it doesn't charge that battery back up fully. So over a period of time, the whole thing comes to a grinding halt. If I reset the voltage detection for the switch circuit to detect the voltage drop at about 8 volts, and then swap over, the thing will just run for months. I've actually had to stop it in the end because it's just getting on my nerves, it running it back at the shed. So it's actually been running for many months, and I've only just finally plucked up courage to put it on YouTube, if you like.
But now we're going to briefly touch on what Richard was talking about in his last programme, the Stan Myers cell. And this again is another electrolytic process, used for electrolysing water. And it uses a high frequency pulsed circuit. It generates high frequency pulses of electricity into the electrolysis process. Seems to have some kind of feedback mechanism as well. We've come to that conclusion that Meyer built into the electronics some sort of feedback components which he didn't put in the patent. The process, when you electrolyse it, yields hydrogen, raw hydrogen, and you then can burn that hydrogen in much the same way as you can burn the vapour from a gasoline, from petrol, in an engine to produce energy. The energy released in the burning of the hydrogen as heat seems to be greater than that used in the electrolysis process to produce it, and that's what apparently has been done. The hydrogen can be produced on demand and does not need to be stored. That's the key thing in the Meyer cell. All the hydrogen cars that you hear about in the media, or the majority of them, they all require the car having a tank which you fill up in the same way as you fill up a tank with gasoline. But the Meyer cell would produce hydrogen on demand. In other words, if you put more current into the cell, it will produce more hydrogen. So if you've got your foot on an accelerator in a car, you could regulate that current going into the cell, then get more hydrogen, and so on. And I've got another clip here about the Meyer cell.
Well, it was during the oil embargo of the United States. It alarmed me that a little country over in the Far East could actually cripple the United States. And realizing that the entire industrial base of the United States and the world is based on the supply and the utilization of energy, it became imperative that we must try to bring in an alternate fuel source and do it very quickly. Of course, I thought originally with the right type of funding, we could possibly get it in within 6 months. But reality shows that the 12 to 15 years was more correct in this projection.
Back in the 70s, Stan Meyer set out single-handedly to solve America's energy problems. He decided to do it using water, the world's most abundant storehouse of hydrogen, which is a far more powerful fuel than oil. For 15 years, Meyer has been fighting to get his inventions taken seriously.
Most inventors have to be a loner. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned and don't rely on other people to support you, because they will not. More times than not, an invention is really stolen from the inventors. Even in my prior development of high technology, I've had patents taken from me. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks to be very cautious.
Meyer has always stood out against the crowd. He has no formal qualifications as a scientist because he didn't wait to graduate from high school, leaving early to go straight into research at the high-powered Battelle Institute in his native Ohio. Now he works full-time as a private inventor. He's built a device with potentially revolutionary implications. There is nothing startling about a machine that can extract the hydrogen from water. What is highly unusual is that it should do so with ordinary tap water. The conventional method is called electrolysis. Meyer has turned that process on its head. Unlike electrolysis, his device doesn't use up large amounts of electric current, nor does it produce an enormous amount of waste heat. For 20 years, he has been refining a method to fracture water. which produces vast amounts of hydrogen on demand. This is not his latest apparatus. He was unwilling to let us point a camera at that. This is the simple device he used to convince a reluctant patent office that his revolutionary concept actually works. Alloy rods, acting as electrodes, are housed in a perspex container that's filled with water. Normal mains voltage is fed in through a transformer, but critically, there is virtually no current consumed, less than half an amp. The result is dramatic. Hydrogen pours off with the flick of a switch. Meyer claims the key is his electronics, which pulses electricity rapidly across the rods at up to 20,000 cycles per second. In a way that's not readily apparent, this process transforms the equation. Whereas in conventional electrolysis, 3 times as much energy is consumed as is produced in the form of hydrogen fuel, in Meyer's apparatus, the reverse is true. It appears to produce several 100% more energy than it consumes.
Stan has something that's characteristic of the people that sound like they've done something to tap zero-point energy. Has high frequency, high voltage, and there's a combination of the two at which something occurs. With Chernetsky in Russia, it was what he called a self-sustaining discharge. The tube would run by itself. When Stan gets this effect, the amount of hydrogen and oxygen that are emitted off these 2 electrodes is a step function. It almost boils the water. If I did this with standard electrochemicals, I need current, and the water should rise a degree every couple of seconds. With Stan's, it'll run for a half hour, and the water temperature hasn't changed. Something's different.
Meyer demonstrates this repeatedly without any difficulty, and yet on the face of it, it represents an extraordinary revolution. His measurements over the years suggest 1,700% greater efficiency than conventional electrolysis. And, if he's to be believed, he's getting much better results from his latest, still secret invention.
Well, I first got involved with Stan Meyer when I went over there with a couple of colleagues to look at his water-splitting device. And so we arrived at Stanley Mayer. He had a demonstration cell. We filled it with tap water. In fact, I did that myself. And he switched it on, and almost instantly there were 3 jaws dropped because of the rate at which the gas poured off. It was quite spectacular.
Whatever energy source Stan Meyer had tapped, it was not explicable by the electric power that was going into it. So something was powering it outside of conventional wisdom.
There is no question that the gas coming off in such abundance is hydrogen. Meyer ignites it to produce a high-temperature flame able to cut through metal.
Stanley Mayer has faced a lot of difficulties. He's 3 times tried to launch the device and produce press conferences, had the technical press round, but he's been almost universally slated. In the early days, very much so, they just ridiculed the whole idea. He's getting a little more notice now because some scientists are getting interested. But by and large, science is very intolerant, particularly modern science.
As with Tesla, Griggs and others, Meyer's claims are so far outside the received scientific wisdom that they've been ignored by the majority of the scientific establishment. But then, Meyer has ignored them too. He has poured his energies over the last 10 years into establishing recognition for his claims by getting international patents.
In the processing, there was a great deal of difficulty in trying to process the legal paperwork in such a way as to allow the patent office to fully understand what was actually occurring. In one instant, we brought the water fuel cell to Washington, D.C., and of course I had tweaked it in such a way to produce an enormous amount of hydrogen and oxygen gas, and the patent examiner said, no, it will not work based on the electrolysis process. And when we turned it on and produced an enormous amount of hydrogen and gas, the examiner finally realized that we were doing exactly that, and went out in the hallway and started screaming and hollering to everybody on the floor, put out all your cigarettes, hydrogen's in the building. So we started laughing and said, well, we certainly convinced everybody in the patent office that we can do what we said we can do.
Even so, the US Patent Office dragged their feet for 3 years before granting patents on the hydrogen-producing device. Since then, against massive resistance, he's managed to get patents established throughout Europe and Japan. But the hydrogen machine was only the first step towards Mars' ultimate dream. If he gets it right, this application of his technology would change the 21st century in the same way that the Wright brothers and Carl Benz transformed the 20th. He is currently modifying a beach buggy to run on nothing but water. It doesn't have a petrol tank or even a hydrogen container. It has just a tank of water. He's invented a device called a water splitter to replace the spark plug. As the water is injected into the engine, Meyer claims it's fractured into hydrogen and oxygen and then burned as fuel. Meyer is working on a kit to modify any engine. He hopes to demonstrate it on this car within 12 months.
And of course, the blessing to the use of the water as a fuel source, that on combustion, the byproduct is water mist. So we're even solving the environmental pollution problem at the same time that we're using water to maintain the industrial basis of the world.
Meyer is protective about his inventions to the point of self-confessed paranoia. Most observers describe him as a crank and his car as an aberration. If only a fraction of what Meyer claims for his technology can be achieved, it would represent a vindication for NASA's involvement. It would also be a powerful threat to many entrenched vested interests.
If Stan Meyer's device works like he advertises, you would make energy available universally almost free. That is a major, major, major impact.
When new technology comes in existence, there's a great resistance to it because it can affect a lot of economic factors. In this particular case in the United States, we pay out roughly about $200 billion a year for foreign oil. It's quite obvious that the Arabs would pay $200 billion to try to keep this type of technology out of the economy. And many times over the last decade, I have been offered enormous amounts of money to simply sell out or to sit on it. The Arabs offered me well over $1 billion cold cash, simply to sit on and do absolutely nothing with it. My life has been threatened many times. Of course, I happen to believe in the power of angels. And if I don't believe in the power of angels, I don't believe I'll be around here too long.
Is it possible, as well as an engine for a car, you could use it for an engine for lifting things?
You could use it for anything because you just have to convert the energy into whatever form. You could use it to, you could use the hydrogen energy when you burn it to charge up batteries and then put those batteries into whatever, you know, you could do anything with it.
Is it possible that's been invented before?
Oh, well, yeah, that's what we're coming to. You know, the people that run the world know all about this. They know all about it. You know, it's not just, I mean, a lot of people think it's just the economics. No, it's not just that. That's one big factor, yes, but it's not the only factor. And here we have another one, the HHO gas generator. I've got another news clip, but I'm going to move on, as we're going to run out of time. Similar sort of thing, this device splits water and produces HHO gas. It seems to be something similar to the Meyer technology. This website is still going. They've actually used the HHO gas for a welding process. But I'm not going to have time to play that. Because otherwise we're going to run out of time. But I'd say I've got the DVDs at the back if anybody wants more. You can watch it on my website. You don't even have to buy a DVD because I've got this presentation on my website. Check the evidence.
Didn't you mention that Meyer did get killed?
He did. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yes, Meyer ended up... He was approached by the Pentagon and they said, oh, well, we'd like to use some of your technology in our tanks or something to power them. And he said, okay. And shortly after meeting with them, he came out of a restaurant having had a meeting with 2 Belgian investors, says I've been poisoned and dropped dead in the car park. That was in 2003.
Did they discover what he was poisoned with?
No, I don't know anything more about that. Again, you can go read it.
He ordered a glass of iced tea, and his brother was there.
Yeah, that's right.
He drank the iced tea, and he looked at his brother, and he said, my God, they've killed me. He got up and he ran for the parking lot to try to get to the car to get to the hospital, and he was dead when he hit the deck. So probably some form of deadly cyanide.
Something we don't know, but yes, he ended up dead in the same way that Eugene Malov ended up dead, and Bruce Palmer. And this is all part of the cover-up. In other words, if they don't get you by the legal bit, the financial bit, or you know, just general sort of harassment, and they don't get you by burning down your workshop and stealing all your equipment, they'll kill you. You know, I've got a slide that basically says that. Why, oh why would anyone want to cover up cheap energy sources? Why have we got an environmental movement? I mean, you know, I almost want to, you know, go up to these Marks and Spencer's truck drivers. This truck has been streamlined, you know, to save energy. And say, do you know what's written on the side of your truck is a load of rubbish? Rubbish. And it goes back to what Neil was saying. We've all been conned by the media because of this repetition. CO2, you know, all this rubbish about that. But this is what's behind it.
You're sounding angry.
Wouldn't you? Yeah, I'm surprised I'm angry, you know. Surprised more people aren't. The energy industry is probably, as it said in that clip, the biggest global industry of all. Oil, gas, coal mining and prospecting are huge, expensive operations. The vested interests are enormous. Everyone needs energy, even the governments of the world. Even medium to large scale use of more conventional technologies, such as the basic electric car running on conventional battery technology, seem to have been terminated as early as possible. See the film Who Killed the Electric Car? That was in the thing in the 90s. Well, you can go and look at the story Who Killed the Electric Car. There's a new car just come out called the Tesla One, which is also came out, was announced a few days ago. That uses a solar charger and some battery system. There's no gas in it, and you can drive it at 100 miles an hour for 200 miles or something. So I think that's going to get cut down as well. But we'll see. Maybe it won't. Now, national security was brought up. Physicist and engineer Dr. Tom Valone worked at the US Patent Office, and in a 2001 email to Gary Vesperman, he has stated, "As a former patent examiner, I can tell you that the number of securitized patents in the vault at the Patent Office Park 5 building is closer to 4,000 or more. They never receive a patent number, and the inventor is rarely, if ever, compensated by the government for use of the invention. The US Patent Office has a 9-member committee that screens patents for national security implications. A hidden purpose of this committee is also to screen energy-related patents which could threaten the power and fossil fuel companies." So the fix is in already, folks. Same, I'm sure it's the same in the UK.
Do not patent things.
Okay, the other problem is this.
Government complex.
The academic government complex, as Mallard calls it.
The academic government complex, not the military-industrial complex, as much as the academic government complex is against new scientific ideas that threaten the foundations of their work. And they, no matter how many papers are published, I don't care whether they're on the internet or not on the internet or where they are, the establishment academic government complex is brain dead.
I mean, why can't they open their arms and say, this is exciting, let's try it, let's experiment, and let's jump in it?
Well, it's remarkable. I must tell you, George, 15 years, almost 15 years now, after that fateful day of March 23rd, 1989, I continue to evolve in my understanding of the emotional and psychological and intellectual armoring, to borrow a term from the famous Wilhelm Reich, that scientists have. It's astounding. One physicist at MIT, whose name is Dr. Hermann Feshbach, one of the world's foremost nuclear physics people. Now he's deceased. But at MIT, as I was finishing up my time there as a senior person in the MIT news office as a science journalist, he had played a role in getting rid of a major article that was going to appear in the MIT magazine, very influential magazine called Technology Review. It's on newsstands all over the place. He said to me, "I've had 50 years of experience in nuclear physics, and I know what's possible and what's not possible." And then that was it. That was his total statement, which I would cite forever as a statement, a kind of statement that should never come out of the mouth of any person who considers themselves a legitimate scientist. They're not a scientist if they say, based on previous knowledge and theory that I have, I know for all time what is possible and what's not. That's obviously crazy.
And as you see there, Mallard wrote this book, Fire from Ice. He left MIT in disgust when he discovered that they'd falsified their results about cold fusion when MIT tried to reproduce Pons and Fleischmann's work. And he set up the New Energy Foundation, I think in the 90s sometime, with Steve Crivet and a few other guys. And they were trying to get funding for small-scale things like cold fusion experiments, organoaccumulator experiments, and other related technologies. And apparently they got a group of guys together and they were going to make a presentation to Congress. And then he was murdered, apparently in a bungled burglary at his parents' house that he was renting out. And he was murdered on 17th of May 2004, about 3 months after that recording was made. So again, they got to him as well. So it seems. And again, I'll just go back to this. Bruce De Palma's words from that clip before, the CIA operates through various innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent, the Benign Institute, founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring energy to the free energy into the world. If free energy technology was not real, these operations would not be needed. And I've already mentioned Edgar Mitchell, and I think, yeah, I've played that clip already. So that brings us to Seize Power and Stephen Greer. I'm sure a few people in the room have heard of Stephen Greer. Yeah? Well, that's how I got into all of this, actually, in 2003 when I discovered this disclosure project that he put together. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. How the hell did he do that? And then the big, sort of link that he made in my brain was that the UFO cover-up was to do with energy, not aliens, or not necessarily just aliens, but with energy. If people begin to realise that these craft that are coming here, what do they run on? Do they run on, what energy system do they use? Coal, oil, gas, nuclear? No, clearly not that, if you look at all the evidence. And he set up this thing called Seize Power, Space Energy Access Systems, in 2001. And he basically says, all right, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to set up a website, inventors come to me, and I'll connect you with investment funds.
It wasn't created on September 11, 2001, was it?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was before that. It could have been. I don't know.
Something to look at.
But he basically said, use the UFO technology that was known about in black projects to get free energy sources to market. Fantastic. And he had an agreement for inventors to contact him through the website, and you could go and read this. It's about 10 pages long, this agreement, and he could send him an email, and he would, connect you with the right funds and the right people. Now, I've got a lot of text on this, but it's just merely to illustrate a point, rather than for me to read it all out. Now, I thought Seize Power was a fantastic idea. Somebody was actually trying to get free energy devices out. Greer went on the radio, he was openly talking about this, and so on. And then in 2007, he starts talking about something called Aero 2012. And this was an initiative to get free energy devices out to the public and connect inventors with investment funds. I thought, I think I've heard that before somewhere. And so I went onto this Aero 2012 website, and it was an identical copy of the Seize Power website, except for the colour scheme and the logo. All the pages were the same, all the technical agreements were the same, and so on. And I've just got one page from there. Why Aero? An overview for inventors, an historical overview of over-unity electric generators and other conventional energy innovations. That's Aero 2012 on the left. The Seize Power website went down. Eventually they overlapped for a period of time. Why Seize? An overview for inventors, an historical overview of over-unity electric generators and so on. Identical. So I thought, what's he doing? Well, what he's doing is he's collecting information and passing it to a third party. That's what he's doing.
He's seizing it.
Well, yeah, you could say that. So that's what this Seize Power and these Aero 2012 initiatives are for, because Aero 2012 then went down. Greer started the Orion project, and he was sending out he wanted to collect $3 million for that. Now, the Aero 2012 thing, he posted this 1 or 2 hour presentation, but he didn't show any, I've shown you video clips from the Channel 4 documentary, I've shown you Pons and Fleischmann, I've shown you Bruce De Palma. In this 2 hour presentation that Greer did in 2007 to launch Aero 2012, all he had in the background, you can just see it there, that was a screenshot of the Aero 2012 website. And he just talked for 2 hours about free energy devices. He didn't show any of the results of this Seize Power project. He didn't say what was successful, what had failed, what he'd done wrong, what had happened to him, whether his life had been threatened. None of that. It was just all this sort of positive sounding spiel. But I'd heard it all before. I'd heard it all before, so I was wise to it. So it appears that Greer is collecting information. I'm not going to play the clips, we're going to run short of time. Yeah, and he won't talk about 9/11. A lot of these people will not talk about 9/11, and they won't talk about what I talk about a lot, which is Dr. Judy Wood's research, which I'll come to. Tom Bearden is also hooked in with Greer, and he's also hooked in with Tony Craddock, who is an oil industry consultant who runs the website cheniere.org. He owns that website, which is Bearden's website. And Bearden supposedly produced this free energy device, but apparently it doesn't work. It's a motionless electromagnetic generator. But Tony Craddock is connected to Bearden and Greer. Yeah, so deaths, we've covered some of these. Wilhelm Reich was found dead in his prison cell, 1957. Bruce De Palma, dead in 1997. Stan Meyer, dead, apparently in March, I thought it was 2003, but it was 1998. Eugene Mallove, dead. James Black, on August 2003. He was a Nobel laureate, 1988, Nobel laureate for medicine. Black was found dead in his car, I think, on August 1st, 2003. He attempted to sue US-Canadian government over their actions against John Hutchison's research, and he was found on his bed in his apartment. The autopsy, no, it wasn't his car. The autopsy described it as a natural death, a possible heart attack. At the time of his death, he was 51 years old, in perfect health, and had never had any heart problems. Ari M. de Geus, November 11, 2007, inventor of a revolutionary self-powering battery of AMDG Scientific Corporation, was found slumped in his car, this is what I was getting mixed up with, totally unresponsive in the long-term parking lot of the Charlotte. Michael Zabur, name probably not familiar. He was the nephew of William Zabur, and William Zabur worked with Eugene Mallove to set up the New Energy Foundation. Michael Zabur was Judy Wood's student. Yeah. March 19th, 2006, he was shot in the head in a mugging. And he was Judy Wood's student. So there's a direct link. I'm not going to go into cover that. So how do we get access to free energy devices? One YouTube posting describes what happens. I mentioned this, but it's worth re-emphasising, I think. Stan Meyer and then many others, always the same story. The Pentagon wants to see your idea, tell you how they would like to use your invention. You demonstrate your device, proving it to them that it works. Then they block off all your efforts and end up killing you. The only way to get a free energy device out to the public is to forget about patents, distribute it underground, sell it to EV enthusiasts with the plans and encourage them to travel around and do as you are. You then have created a non-interlinked underground distribution system that will spread like the general populace, and it will spread like wildfire and will be unstoppable. That's right. You've got to do something like that. But the problem is, you can build a device, but you've got to make it so that it works 24/7. And to do something like that, you need some significant manufacturing skills, machine shop skills. Not many people have got access to those. That's the problem. So I'm going to come on to this now. The weaponization connection. This is also why we haven't got free energy. And this is all from Dr. Judy Wood's material. I think probably a good few people are familiar. Looking at the events of 9/11, you have to re-examine them if you want to know what happened. A lot of people talk about all kinds of stories about remote-controlled planes and bombs in the building and thermite and micronukes, underground nukes, basically anything except what actually happened. And this set of pictures is unlocks the door. This is the key. You see 70 stories of steel turning to dust before your very eyes. And if you watch some of these pieces, you can actually see them turning to dust before they hit the ground. They are turning to dust as they are falling. This is technology in plain view. Technology in plain view. Everyone now can see this for themselves. Free energy technology at work. No explosions, no heat, no flames, no sparks.
Paper wasn't burned, was it?
Paper was unburned. This is technology, folks. This is what's happened to the free energy technology. You haven't got it, running your car and your house because they already knew about this, and I think they knew about this technology at least in 1983. At least in 1983. Probably well before that. Probably in the 50s, because it links into the anti-gravity technology as well, which you also haven't got access to. I've done another presentation about anti-gravity technology. And again, you'll see the spire here sticking up, and the camera zooms in on this section, and you'll see it. Now, I'd never really seen this set of pictures until about 2006 when Dr. Judy Wood showed them to me, and she, she's obviously gone on to research many more of the details in relation to this since then, and she's put this into her book, Where Did the Towers Go?
You see that in slow motion.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
You see the explosion.
So, well, there's no explosions. It's actually just an expulsion of material to some extent. There aren't any explosions. So this is 110 stories of building turning to dust in 10 seconds. This is perhaps the clearest shot, and you can see the stuff coming off. But we don't know who has this technology. People say, oh, it's the US government, oh, George Bush did it, oh, the Israelis did it, oh, the Zionists did it, oh, the Jesuits did it. We don't know. We don't know. I don't know this technology. But we do know two of the companies that are involved. Science Applications International Corporation and Applied Research Associates. Funnily enough, Science Applications International Corporation is mentioned 5 times in Stephen Greer's disclosure document. But he doesn't talk about this. He's never contacted me or Dr. Judy Wood to say, what about this energy weapon then? I've never heard him speaking about it, and yet this has been on the table since 2006. And certainly the Hudson effect connection, which we'll come to next, has been on the table since 2008. Unburned paper littered the streets. People levitated but not burned by the dust cloud. No bright flashes seen as the towers came down. The key point is, what technology can do this kind of destruction with little or no observable heat generated? Similar to cold fusion, remember? Energy coming out. Or similar to Meyer's cell, I should say. Energy coming out but very little heat. 80 to 90% of 2 of the world's tallest buildings disappeared in 20 seconds. Where is the rubble? This is World Trade Center Building 7. That was destroyed at 5:20 in the evening. This was taken before 5:20 in the evening. There should be the remains of 200 stories of buildings there. And instead we've got, I'll just show you these little clips here. That's the amount of the height of the pile based on there, so you can see quite clearly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It got turned into talcum powder dust.
Yeah, there it is, and there's the dust, some of it. Raging car fires, paper not burning, only a few inches away. These are not conventional fires, so it would appear. They might turn into conventional fires at some point, but initially not. What's happened to this car? We've got some plastic surviving on the top, yet this is so badly burned, or it looks burned, but it's not burned. The door handle's gone, the trunk's popped open, this is all gone. So what's going on? And this is some of the much of the evidence that Dr. Judy Wood has compiled. And here's the levitation effect. I think this proves that gravity comes into play here. When you open up this energy system, this energy source, when you connect to 0-point energy, you get these weird effects coming out. Truck upside down, car upside down, car upside down, car upside down, car right way up. Energy effects seen at the World Trade Center, not talked about, kept well out of the media, as Neil was talking about.
Engine block's gone.
Yep, it's all in the book, and we've done videos as well. One pane only broken there. Why is only one pane broken? Those windows were not damaged by projectiles, by things flying through them. They were damaged by longitudinal waves, vibrations. Same again, only one pane damaged. How do you work that out? It's because it's not what you think it is. Oh, and how about this? Not a lot of people want to talk about this either, because now we're way off into outer space. Hurricane Erin on 9/11. The eye shaped like a pentacle. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm just trying to get through the information now. But the key thing with the Hurricane Erin data is the path. When I wrote to the government propaganda unit called Act on CO2, which is one of these things that's meant to encourage businesses to use energy efficiently, I says, right, so Act on CO2 then, so you know about the climate change and stuff like that. Well, tell me about Hurricane Erin then. Hurricane Erin starts as a hurricane, or was registered as a hurricane, on the 1st of September in the Atlantic. Travelled for 6 days and hit Bermuda on the 7th. Did a bit of damage at Bermuda. And then, guess what? Went in a straight line towards New York City, ending up at 8 o'clock in the morning, closest to New York City, and then on the 12th it made a right-hand turn and went off out towards Newfoundland. Oh, it's just a coincidence. They wrote back to me and said, this Act on CO2 propaganda arm wrote back to me and said, oh, well, Mr. Johnson, I'm afraid that September is hurricane season in the USA. September is hurricane season in the USA. Yes, I did know that, but this particular hurricane was closest to New York City at 8 o'clock in the morning, just before those terrible events in New York unfolded. They wrote back to me and said, I've got nothing to add to my previous letter. I bet you haven't. So there's the size of the hurricane. This is Dr. Wood's slide that she put together. It actually slowed down and the expanse of the storm became larger as it got close to New York, and then it shrunk down in the couple of days following. Oh dear, we have some problems with the story of the planes too, folks, because if you look at this particular slide that Dr. Wood had put together, this is actually the Earth's magnetic field measured in Alaska by 6 different magnetometers. They're devices that measure the strength of the Earth's magnetic field. And at 8:46, we have a minimum in this trace. Guess what happened at 8:46? That's right. The first plane, or so-called plane, it wasn't a plane, struck the World Trade Center. So how is it possible that the Earth's magnetic field detected this plane approaching Tower 1 20 minutes before it actually happened, 3,500 miles away? The answer is it wasn't a plane, it was an energy burst which created the hole, some type of energy burst. And that whatever system it was that they used, I would contend was charging up before that actually happened. They were charging it up. And indeed, in John Hutchison's experiments, which I'll try and come to if we get a chance, John Hutchison, in his experiments, the effects only happen after he's run the equipment for about half an hour, something like that, in many cases. Since 1979, he's been doing experiments with electrostatic and magnetic fields, microwaves and RF generators. In certain combinations and at certain times, John has produced jellification of metal, bending and fracturing of metal, levitation, transmutation. Remember that? John Bockris talking about one metal turning into another. That's why we think the Hutchison effect and cold fusion is related. And that's why Jones was put on the 9/11 case, to divert people away from things like transmutation and the effects that are related to cold fusion, which are energy effects. Fuming, which is what was seen coming up out of the World Trade Center after the events. That's not necessarily smoke. The reaction didn't stop. Disappearance of samples. Some samples appear to have disappeared completely. And fusing of dissimilar materials like metal and wood. And this is all in Dr. Wood's book and on our websites and stuff. I haven't got time to play the clip. I'll play a little bit of this. And guess what? John Hutchison's actually filmed these weird fire effects too. This is an experiment he did. The caption was wrong. He actually did this in 2006, I found. And what he's doing is he's intersecting electric and magnetic fields, radio frequency fields, and in this area he's actually trying to do a reproduction of the famed Philadelphia experiment, where he was trying to make they tried to make the ship disappear. Again, that's a whole other story about that. But you can see that these fires appear to start, but there's no fuel. There's no obvious source for combustion. This on 9/11, this firefighter is walking through this paper which appears to be burning. Doesn't appear to be worried about that. Why would he be walking so close to that burning material? Well, what if it wasn't hot? I think you'll see this flame coming up. So all this is documented. It's all out there, but almost nobody will talk about it. You just get another burst of flame in a minute. And then I'll go on to the next clip. So what Dr. Wood basically did in her research, which I haven't openly stated, she found that many of the effects that she'd been cataloguing since about 2004 were actually matched up with effects created in John Hutchison's experiments. This is a 3-inch solid copper bar. This is a beam which is from the remains of the World Trade Center, which is kept by WJE for NIST. This is an aluminium bar that appears to have all delaminated itself and melted in peculiar ways. This is from the World Trade Center. This is an experiment which John did in November 2008, and he levitates this wrench. This is from the World Trade Center. And we've got recently another witness account that actually came out on the 11th this year. This Buzzelli guy. He floated down the stairs while the building was being destroyed around him. I've just posted that on my website. So we've got all these effects. I'm going through this very quickly, but these effects line up precisely. This guy, I won't...
And I picked up the camera.
This is David Hanshirt.
Out of habit.
I won't play all his testimony. He was levitated.
My mind said, run, run, run. And never in 20 years of shooting in New York have I run from an assignment. But something in the back of my head just said, run. And as I hit the corner of Liberty Street, it was almost being picked up by a tornado. Almost being picked up by a wave. It was like being picked up.
With the black cloud.
That black cloud had substance. It was like night, but it had a solid feel to it. It was like gravel, hot gravel, and just picked me up and tossed me about a block. At one second I was running, and the next second I was airborne. And I lost my glasses, I lost my cell phone, I lost my pager, but managed to hold on to both cameras.
But it threw you for a block?
I was back down at Ground Zero last week and walked the area where I have a pretty good recollection of where I was and where I wound up, and it was just under a city block.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building.
You were picked up off the ground?
Physically picked up off the ground.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in.
So he describes being lifted up, and we've got a lot of witnesses of this. There's some more. Again, I'm getting up close up to the time. We found quite a number of people that were lifted off the ground. Firemen were running along, their hats lifted off. One guy said he saw his hat floating away in front of it like the Wizard of Oz. So all these effects, metal effects, again, John Hutchison's experiment on the left and the World Trade Center on the right. Bankers Trust Building, again, some very peculiar effects in that. I'm running out of time, so I realise I'm sort of more or less doing flashcards with these. But this very peculiar damage here. And in the building, this here is paint. This is paint. So if this was heat that melted this, why didn't this paint burn off? Think of the intense heat that would be required to melt that into that form. But this paint is still on. And here, you can just see at the edge, there's a telephone cable from a telephone. You can just see it coiled up. How did that survive? And then they repaired the Bankers Trust building. There it is, July 2006. They repaired it all. Repaired the exterior sections of it. And then they took it all down piece by piece at a cost of $70 million. It's gone now. It took them about 4 years to dismantle it.
Did it keep rusting?
Yeah, it had an ongoing rust problem which they declared as a mould infection. Bankers Trust was said to have a mould infection and they had to take it down. Steel frame building. So, dissimilar materials merge again. We've seen this with John Hutchison's experiments where a stainless steel knife merged with an aluminium block and then he sliced through it with a grinder to grind down so you can see the layers. And then we see this thing going through a tree, straw going into trees, this pole going into the wood here. What it appears is that in powerful storms you get strong electrical field effects which are having some effect under certain circumstances on the materials and causing them to lose their coherency, if you will. That's what appears to be happening. But we're never told about that. Now, Dr. Wood observed that John Hutchison uses a Tesla coil in his experiments, or used to, doesn't so much now. And this, you build up a large charge on the top here. This is like a storm system. And what did we have? We had the hurricane. So we would contend, I mean, she doesn't say this exactly like I do, but the weapon, as was, required a mixture of different types of energy. And one of the types of energy came from the static field associated with the storm. That's what it appears to have been. Just a bit about the cover-up now, a couple of slides about that. I've decided that I'm going to form a group called Liars for 9/11 Truth. Okay? This will include Alex Jones, Richard Gage, Jim Fetzer, Stephen E. Jones, Dmitry Karlazov, probably people like Richard Dolan, probably Stephen Greer as well. So I'll be putting up a website for that. The main culprit of one of the cover-ups is Jim Fetzer. He invited me to join the Scholars for 9/11 Truth group in 2005, along with Stephen E. Jones. And he wrote to me, "You have taken for granted that Hutchison's research is well-founded or at least sincere." No, that was untrue. I'd known of John Hutchison's research since 1998 or 1999, having come across it in a book by Albert Budden, and also it was discussed on $1 Billion Secret. And Fetzer wrote to Dr. Judy Wood on 3rd of March 2008, "Just between us, if Judy were to back off her relations with Hutchison, whom I consider to be a fraud, I think her standing can be salvaged." That was a threat. Yeah. And he's since that time had, he's claimed to have supported this book on his website, but when you go and listen to his radio interviews, he gets about 6 or 7 different people to say why Dr. Wood's work's only a theory, or why it might not be true, and on and on. You can read about all that in my book. I'm only covering it in very quick form here. We're getting up to the end of the time. Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, they would not put their thermite evidence into a legal challenge in 2007. I've written about that. I won't cover all that. It's got a plane in it, running out of time. But supporters who have of the Architects and Engineers group who have put Judy Wood on their profile have had the references to Judy Wood deleted off their profile without their permission. So if you go onto this Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth website, set up a profile and put on a link to Dr. Judy Wood's website, I can almost guarantee that within 48 hours it will be taken off.
Now, with Judy Wood is not going to acknowledge any of that evidence and just hand wave it away, then she's not practicing science, she's practicing witchcraft. Go ahead.
So Richard Gage, head of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, says that 500-page science textbook has been done by somebody practicing witchcraft. Oh. That's what he says. And he's just had a big splash on PBS in the States with this expert speak out about 9/11, and everyone's raving about it, when in actuality it's just another cover-up because it's bombs in the building.
It's so one-sided.
It is. And I tried to put a press release about the Erin research that I showed you in 2008 on Op-Ed News. They refused to publish it. That's Op-Ed News, which is an alternative news website. PESWiki, Free Energy, that's quite a good resource, but Stephen E. Jones has got his own page on PESWiki about energy systems, and you can go and read that, but I don't think it mentions cold fusion. You won't find a page about Judy Wood on PESWiki. Same with Stephen Greer. I think he knows something. At a subtle level of electromagnetism, this is Stephen Greer in his book, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, you can transmute elements and also transfer something from one place to another and infect or harm someone electronically. This is a very lethal application of a science that could be used to heal people. Unfortunately, right now, the worst elements of the humanity currently possess these technologies. When people worry about these technologies being discussed, I say forget about it. The worst elements already have them. I think he's telling the truth. Stephen Greer will not talk about what happened to the World Trade Center. In fact, in an interview, he implies that it was Al-Qaeda that did it. He's not overtly stated that, but that's what he implies. So, in many ways, we are hostages to this technology. And I've got this truck. Here's the truck from Marks and Spencer's. A large part of the cover-up has been created by this mindset, again in the way that Neil was describing this morning. If you create the mindset that you can't have free energy, it's just a ridiculous dream, then you don't really need to do much to keep the cover-up going. And that's essentially the way it works. Now, one has to wonder about this clip from John Carpenter's 1988 film, They Live.
Our projections show that by the year 2025, not only America, but the entire planet will be under the protection and the dominion of this power alliance. The gains have been substantial, both for ourselves and for you, the human power elite. You have given us entree to the resources we need in our ongoing quest for multidimensional expansion. And in return, the per capita income of each of you here tonight has grown, and this year alone, by an average 39%. And I've just received word that our forces have won a major victory. The underground terrorist network has been destroyed here on the West Coast. We are off crisis alert. The situation is normal again.
How you doing, boys? I didn't know you'd been recruited. Welcome aboard.
Earth is our stepping stone for a
You know you boys really should have dressed for the party now you can afford it. I gotta tell you, I sure am proud to be here. You seen the whole place?
I haven't had a chance to yet.
Come on, I'll show you around. You know, I knew me and you had a lot in common. First time we met.
Money isn't the nicest thing in life.
Hey, waiter.
The only thing.
Thank you, buddy.
Excuse me. Where the hell are we?
Backstage at the show, boys. I'll admit it is a little funky, but it serves its purpose. How'd you get here? Use one of these little portable jobs? I know we ain't supposed to use them except in cases of emergency, but they're so much fun. Now, you think that's something? Take a look at this. Go on, take a closer look.
Attention commuters. Flight Alpha 7 to Andromeda is now ready for boarding. Please step to the transmission platform.
That's where they come from.
All carry-on luggage must be held securely. Thank you for waiting, and we hope you have a pleasant trip.
I don't know how it works exactly, but it has to do with some sort of gravitational lens deal, bending a light or some damn thing. But you can move from place to place, world to world if you want to. You see, the whole thing here works like one big airport. Boys, let me tell you, they got their act together. Believe you me.
They've got their act together. And that's why we're in the situation we are, and the guys that are running the planet, or I don't know who they are, but I think they have got their own secret space program, and they've got all that technology that they can use at will. And they cannot obviously let any knowledge of that get out into the general populace. So that's basically the end of this presentation, and there's plenty of good, a few good websites. There's a lot of disinformation out there, obviously. You can look at freeenergy.co.uk, infiniteenergy.com, that's a recommended one. LENR-CANR is all about cold fusion or low energy nuclear reactions. JLNlabs.fr is a good one. And you know, some of these are linked on my website, so you can just go there if you want to go from there. But that's basically it. I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and it's great to see so many people here.